Opening.
Yes, to start off, I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name's Danelle Hogan. I'm the director of this amazing project at the Pima County School Superintendent's Office. And as many of you know, we have a project with Marana working with teacher leaders at every single grade level to adopt the new science standards. And that's been really amazing and awesome. And part of our team is Sherry Dennis, who just retired from Marana this last school year from 4th grade, most recently. And then Sarah Torres is also on our team. And we're super thankful to Michelle and Kim Parker, Michelle Thielen and Kim Parker, who've just been amazing, incredible supporters. And also to Kristen Reedy, and you're all lucky to have an assistant superintendent who has a science background, and that makes life tremendously easier in so many awesome ways. So as part of that work,
Mary Boulay is here too, so
yeah.
That is awesome. We love having her here.
Yeah, welcome, Mary. So part of our work with the teacher leaders, well, it's Melissa Wilburn's fault that we got involved in all of this in the best way.
Yes.
So we had shared with the teacher leaders that there's a Stanford curriculum that's already been designed for middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and it's tied to the next generation science standards, which for you all means you'd have to really look at it carefully, the crosswalks on the ADE website in terms of what would be the best match for you, because ours aren't exactly in the same order as the NGSS. But each of those grade levels starts with what they call a 0 orientation to group work unit, and Melissa Wilburn had started to virtualize that, take it from the hard copy in-person stuff that you would do in your classroom to what would this look like if you were going to do it via Google Classroom and Google Docs. And then Sherry and I got involved and said, oh yes, we definitely want to help with this and make it awesome, and then share it with everyone. And even though this is the 6th grade 0 unit, you should be able to use it at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade this year, because none of your students should have seen it last year. And so everybody can use this one this year, and then next year, we hope we're not virtual, but then 7th grade can do the 7th grade 0 unit from Stanford, 8th grade could do the 8th, and you could do what's already there for you. And then 6th grade can continue to use this, and there might be some pieces of this virtual version of the unit that would be handy even if you were in person. So again, the hope today is that we'll be able to walk you through what we've done, the resources that are here, and then if there's absolutely anything that you say like, oh, I think for everyone it'd be nice to tweak this, then we will get that done for you. And our goal is to have this done and hand over the folder to you, a view version of the folder that has all the documents in it by the end of the day tomorrow. And then of course, you'll make a copy of that in your own Marana Google Drives, and then you can do whatever you want with it from there. And it'll, again, have the directions about things that you might need to duplicate and how you'll do that. So this unit has 5 different tasks and kind of an introduction. The tasks are really interesting and fun, and you would be pretty hands-on if you were in the classroom. And again, we've tried to shift those as best we can to stay true to what Stanford was trying to do, and then also shift them into virtual space with some little tricks and twists of things that we knew would be better based on our own experience in the virtual space and just in teaching. So those are the 5 tasks. And again, the idea behind this is that you're setting up your students for success in terms of working together in groups in virtual space or in your classroom space. And so it can't be flipped, right? Like if they're doing group work, they need to be in groups. So this you would do when you have them together. And then we know that some of the middle schools are every other day with science, and then you'll flip to an asynchronous lesson the next day, and then you'll see your students again. And we will have some suggestions and share some other ideas for what you could do for those flip days, or you can select whatever you want. So there must be other intro things that you might have, or nature of science things that you think are really awesome, or some other noticing and wondering things you can want to do on the flip side. Or if you need ideas, you're always welcome to reach out to us. We've got plenty of them that you can choose from, but we'll share some that are ready to go that you could also do in virtual space but asynchronously, or give students an assignment. The intro and task one really go together. Oh, and I should say from here, this whole unit as it's planned right now is about 10 class periods, but of course, you know, you might push or pull that however you see fit. And so that's kind of the planned length of this, this unit, but again, based on the students that you have, you'll have to adjust. And as professional educators, we're certain that you can handle that responsibility. So the first class is an intro to these behavior norms and the role-playing descriptions, and also task one. So that all kind of gets put together. You will have in the folder for this, with all the resources, a slide deck for you as teachers that will have all these slides ready to go. And what's nice about this digital notebook, and this is from Slides Mania. We found it recently and we've fallen in love with it. And we do really recommend this landscape version of it. We're using the portrait version for the digital student journal that you'll see in a bit. But what's nice is when you're in presentation mode, like if I want to skip back to the intro, I can literally click on these tabs and it really does take me to that place. And then I can go to the next slide that's in that tab. So if you're doing digital interactive notebooks, you should join this. And Melissa or Leanne, was it Leanne or Melissa that told us about that digital notebook group?
I think it was Leanne.
So
oh,
Leanne,
the Facebook group. Yeah, it was Leanne.
Yeah, one of our teacher leaders from Fort Huachuca was telling us about this Facebook group that's about digital interactive notebooks, and they've been very active, and they all know about these. And this site, Slides Mania, whoa, there's like a million different versions of different notebooks that you can get from them. They're all free. She's like us. She gives everything away, like use it, share it, change it, whatever. And so for the intro, you'll need to find some way to engage your students with just getting to know these group work and behavior norms. So that could look like a jigsaw. It could just look like a group discussion, or you could put them into breakout rooms, but you just need them to get familiar with these group work behavior norms. And we've tried to rename everything group work behavior norms as opposed to behavior norms that you may have decided for your class already in the first few days of school. So when you're working in groups, these are kind of the expectations. And again, these come from that Stanford Zero unit. They also had additional group work behavior norms, and you may choose to either delete these out or keep them in. We put them in so you would have the full set. I think these are also good ones to remind students about. And so you have the full set, but if you decide you want to delete some of these slides in your version of this, then go right ahead. Then it gets into the roles for group work that come with this unit. And there are 6 different ones. And for each one, it talks about the role, like what are that is that person's responsibility. And then what are some questions that the person taking on that role might be asking during group work. And so there's a facilitator, also sometimes referred to as an observer, a harmonizer, which totally makes sense. You can imagine what that person's doing. A reporter, a recorder, materials manager, and then the resource person, who we're also assigning with timekeeping in this unit. And so again, you'll want to find some way to familiarize students with that. And I think before we go further, I'll show you now. So this is the walkthrough version of the unit. Is it still sharing my screen? Yeah, okay, good. So this is what the folder will look like. You will get a link to this middle school orientation to group work unit folder that's view only. And then you will make a copy of that into your Marana drive, and it will have everything you need from the original Stanford unit documents. If you want to reference back to where we were getting something and see, like, is that really how it was meant to be done? You can try to figure that out. Just some other documents, random stuff that we're putting in here related to the unit. And then whatever you need for task 1 is in the task 1 folder, task 2, task 3, task 4, task 5. And then in the main folder is the digital student notebook this walkthrough version that we're doing, the teacher slide deck is the slide deck that you'll use for each task that has exactly the slides that you would want to use to describe stuff to students. And that'll be referenced in the teacher guide that'll literally walk you through like this when you're on this slide, this is what you'd be doing, and this is, and so on. And again, you can read through that and then make it your own and do whatever you want. But we're hoping that it'll be clear enough that you'll be confident that you can do it. And certainly if you have any questions, you can get back to us on that. And these are just notes from our first meeting with teacher leaders on feedback from the draft that we had on Monday, which we've come a long way. But the digital student notebook is something that you will assign to each student through Google Classroom. And when you assign this to each student through Google Classroom, then most of you know by now, then it'll have their name associated with their copy of it. And each student, after they're done with a task, will fill out reflection pieces. And those reflection pieces might happen during your online time with them if you have time, or it could be something that becomes part of their flipped work the next day, or something that happens on their own time as homework. And in their student version of their notebook, there's an intro section that has those behavior norms and the additional behavior norms and the roles, now 2 to a page in their version of the notebook. And then for each task for the students, this will be fairly similar for each task. It will have pages that require them to respond to something. And anytime there's a required response, there'll be these 3 underlined pieces with a yellow highlight so that the students will know that requires them to input something there, like a response, or if they were the facilitator for this task, then they would put facilitator, or if they were just a group member, they would put group member. And again, some of this might be done during class time, and others, like the reflection on the objectives for that particular one, and were they able to do these things, could be something that they could do as homework. And then when they're sharing out as a whole class, they'll be able to take notes in their own journals, and then you could look at those later and give them some kind of a grade or participation related to that. And so then again, there's sections like that for each of the tasks in here. So that's what the digital student notebook looks like. And it includes all 5 of the tasks and responses and evaluation reflection for each one. All right, so then for task 1, this is the one that Melissa was taking on and has modified after figuring out what was meant to happen, which is the same struggle we had as we were looking at it. So for the broken squares challenge, which is task 1, students will, the essential question for the whole unit, which you'll see reiterated for each task, is how do we work productively in groups? And of course we know that there are some strategies that do make group work more effective and enjoyable if you use them as opposed to not. And so at the end of this task, again, students are working on improving how they're working together and making sure that everybody gets done. Nobody's done until everybody's done, which is important. And then for each task, we also include the group work behavior norms that are particularly being focused on for this particular task. So in this case, it's paying attention to what other group members need, and no one is done until everyone's done. Then in this case, there's a demonstration of what the file is going to look like when they're there. And so when this is part of your teacher slide deck, you'll have to go out of presentation mode, and then you can show students when they go in, what they'll do in the document that they'll be working on is changing one of the squares to their name, and then taking pieces to fill in the square completely. But when they're working in a group, once they've been assigned a square, they're the only person that can take a piece and put it in their square. But if this was Sherry's square and I saw, oh, Sherry, I really think you need this, but I'm not allowed to talk to her during this activity, then I could put this near her square as like a suggestion that might be a piece that she needs. But if she had already put a piece in here and I think that somebody else needs it or I might need it, I cannot take that piece out, but I can try to indicate that maybe I need that piece in mine in some way. And there's some rules associated with this that are pretty clear and provided. And so in that case, you'll have to go out of the presentation mode to show them what's happening. But then this is what it will actually look like when they go into their slide for their breakout rooms. So essentially what happens is you have the whole class together, and then you break them out into as many groups as you want, up to 9. We hope you don't have that many students. It's 4 to a group, 4 or 3 people to a group. You don't want 2, I don't think. I think 3 or 4 is like optimal. So you'll have to figure out how that works out. And you know how you can randomly put students into groups and figure that out. But this is what it'll look like, and then students will put their names in there. If there are 3 students, then one student is gonna own 2 of those squares. And then the document that you actually send out to the students, though, is in Task 1 folder. So when you go into Task 1 folder, you'll see the broken squares slide deck, and then you'll see the Task 1 breakout room checklist. And these in the teacher guide for this unit will say, okay, so you want to assign this Task 1 breakout room checklist and this broken squares challenge to the students, but the Task 1 breakout checklist, you're gonna make a copy for each student. The broken squares challenge, you're not gonna make a copy for each student. You're gonna give them the right to edit this one, because all the students are gonna be working on this document at the same time when they're in their breakout rooms. And so when you go in here, if I was in breakout room 1, then everybody in breakout group 1 would be working on this particular slide to do their group work. And then breakout room 2 would be working on this slide, and so on and so forth. And the idea is that the students are, again, working together to complete their squares, but they're not allowed to talk, and they can't steal pieces out of somebody else's, and they can't put a piece into somebody else's square, but they can move it close to a square to say to them, I think you need this piece, but without talking. So that is Task 1 in this unit. And the breakout checklists are really nice, because then when students are in their breakout rooms, they can refer to that first. The facilitator for the group can refer to that and really decide if they have a question for you or if they don't, and you can be wandering around, of course. So that is Task 1. And then, let's see. So, also in your teacher slide deck, it will have slides like this, and we're gonna look at all the slides for Task 1. And then for the other tasks, we're not gonna see all the teacher deck slides. We're just gonna summarize what's going on. It will have breakout room checklist and broken squares file check. So you might want to take some time to have your students go to Google Classroom, open up the documents. Okay, do we have them open, to see if anybody has access before you send them out to their breakout rooms. And then you can give a summary of what they're going to be doing in the breakout rooms and how much time they have. And then when they come back from their breakout rooms and you're done at the end of the class period, then you can tell them that their reflection for Task 1 is on these pages in their digital student notebook. And again, if you have time in that class period for them to complete that, then perfect. If not, this either becomes homework or part of their flipped assignment for the next day. And again, just a reminder that these are the sections that they need to actually make a response to. Now, just to summarize, these won't be in the teacher slide deck, but now this is how we're going to talk about the other tasks. Task 1, again, is one class period that includes like an intro, getting students to become familiar with those group work behavior norms and the roles. And then you're doing that broken squares activity, and then with some journal reflection. And the teacher guide will be really clear about how many students need to go into the breakout rooms, what the time needs to be that you need to set, and all of that. And again, all the documents that you need will be in the Task 1 folder. It'll be very clear exactly where they're at. Next, Task 2 is role playing. And so here are the objectives for that one. And again, the essential question is always the same about how do we work productively in groups? And so the objectives in this one, again, is really focusing on those roles and what's happening for them in those roles. And the one that you're working on in particular for this one, no surprise with role playing, is playing your role in the group. This is 4 45-minute class periods. And again, this center section here, you might decide you're only going to do that for one class period. That's again where it's up to you. But we've tried to arrange this so that it would work based on the timing that we think it would take. And again, you know how that is, like there's a little bit of guesswork associated with that. And then there would be more time for discussion. But the first part of it, you review the roles again, and then there's an orientation script. So you would get, as a whole class, 5 or 6 people to volunteer to play some of those roles. And then on the teacher deck slides, the script comes up. So they're just reading it from the script. And if you have everybody else shut off their videos and only the people that are reading the script, the students that are reading the script, then generally speaking, if you're screen sharing, those will be the students that you're going to see off to the right of the screen share. And so there'll be directions about that in the teacher guide so that it will remind you that you need to give them those directions. Then in the second part, the students go into breakout rooms and they get assigned their own script. So they'll have four or 5 students in each group, and then they'll get assigned their own script. They practice it a little bit, and then they come back and read those scripts. And in each script, then each script is only a page. It's a few lines per person that they have to read. It's not very lengthy. They'll read those scripts to the whole class. They'll be the actors, and the whole class will listen to the script. And then you'll have a class discussion about who wasn't playing their role, what could they do differently, and so on. And then you'll just go through those scripts. And there's 8 different ones. So unless you have more than 32 students, you should be fine. And you could put 5 people in the group and have somebody be the narrator if you needed to, but hopefully you don't have more than 32 people in your class. And then for the last day, because there's 8 scripts, that'll probably take you 2 class periods, 2 45-minute class periods. But again, if you decided you've had enough of it, I guess you could skip it. That would mean skipping students who haven't done their skits yet. So I really do think this is going to take 2 class periods. And then the final day is for those students to then go back to their scripts and rewrite their scripts with people actually playing their roles appropriately, and then share those with the class. And those should just be quick read-throughs, and you shouldn't have to have discussions. So again, the thought is that that would take 1 class period. In the task 2 folder, you have the breakout checklist for part 2, which is where they're reading their own scripts and prepping for how they're going to present it to the class. And it's really just reading it. They don't have to memorize their lines. It should be okay. And then there's also the scripts. So again, in the teacher guide that you'll get, it will say, okay, for this day, for these 2 days, you need to assign the students this breakout checklist and these student scripts, and how to push them out to them in Google Classroom. This is not editable. This is just a PDF because they shouldn't need to edit. They're just reading them as is that day. Then for the last day where they're doing the rewrites, that's where they'll have a breakout list that will tell them what they need to do. And then they'll have an editable version of their scripts, which they'll be able to actually edit in Google Docs because they'll need access to do that. But that's already done. All the scripts are in there. You don't have to do any prep with that at all. Task 3 is called Design Master. In this one, students are really focusing on communication and all kinds of fun stuff. And again, really reflecting on the behavior norms and the roles that are being played by people. It's also about helping group members do things for themselves and listen and pay attention to what others are saying is really critical. Communication is super important. And being able to explain by telling how or why. So descriptive language is going to be critically important in this particular task. It did say in the Stanford unit that this was supposed to be 2 class periods, but I really think that it would be 1. They had the reflection piece as a whole day, and I really think you could have students reflect as part of their flipped assignment and or as homework, and then you could just discuss it right before the next class period, or you could look through it and provide some feedback to them. So I really think this is just a single class period. In this case, you just need the breakout checklist for when they're in their groups and doing that. And then you need this one. And I'm gonna put this in the this link in the chat so you all can tinker around with this a little bit and play. But basically, what's happening is students are, oops, I just pasted it there again. Okay, there it's in the chat. Students are gonna go to this website, and when they go there, it's just an online tangram version. And so they can move the tangrams around. They're also colored, which is nice. If you were doing this in person in your classroom, they would just get like a single color copy of tangrams, which I think makes this really hard. The other thing that's nice about this online version is these shapes kind of pop into very specific angles, which is gonna make their life easier. And then if I'm moving a shape near another one, it will pop into place right on vortices so that they'll be lined up properly. And one of the rules that we will give them for this is that they can't, the design master is not allowed to put something kind of in the middle. It has to be either on an edge or aligned to a vortices so that it'll make their life a little bit easier. Of course, if you want to make it more challenging when they do extra rounds, or if you wanted to do this over a couple days to let them have more fun with it, then you could. So the idea is that the design master would put some kind of a shape together. And then what's different about this, so I've done activities like this called Write It, Do It with Legos, where you have to write the directions and then somebody else has to try to build what you built. So it's similar to that, but the twist is, if I was the design master, I would be building this on my own screen, which of course you can't see. And then if you're in my group, now that I'm done, I would say, okay, now you can ask me questions. But I'm not describing to you what I've built. You're asking questions like, is the pink triangle on the left side of what you've built? Is it on the top? Is it on the bottom? What angle is it at? And the person can answer the questions, but they're not describing what it is they're doing. Now, if you want to twist it and say, now I'm going to let them describe it, that's up to you. But according to the Stanford unit, the way that they're doing it also to really try to get people to ask questions. And it's also about thinking about the questions other people are asking and going, oh, I see what they're doing, so I want to ask questions along those lines. And then after a certain amount of time, students can then check, they can share screens and see like, this is, so the design master can show what they did and then other students can show how close they were, which will be, we think, kind of fun for students. Also, if you have extra time, like after task 1, or if you get done early, or as a flipped assignment, you could actually assign this website to your students and let them do some of the challenges, just so that they get more familiar with how the Tangram user interface works. And so they can actually go and click on one of these shapes and then move these aside and then try to figure out, how the heck do I build this thing using the pieces that I have here? And you just kind of overlap them. It doesn't actually like tell you, oh yes, you have it right, but you can see that you've like covered it all up. I've done this one a couple times, so I know where these things go. But you can see how then they could build these different shapes, and there's lots to practice here. So if you have some extra time at the end of task 1, or if you wanted to use this as part of your flipped assignment after task 1, that would be good use of their time, and these spatial skills are good no matter what. So that is task 3, is again called Design Master, and that's the idea. And then there'll be reflection pieces that go along with that in their student digital notebook. All right, task 4, go back to present mode, is called Off Like a Rocket. And in this case, students are really trying to figure out which 7 people from a list they can agree should go on a spaceship voyage together. And they're, again, practicing their norms, and there's some structure to this that I think is really kind of fun and interesting, and that students you might see use later on. The behavior norms are about being concise in communication, and again, that everybody's participating, and that becomes really critical in this, everybody's voice being involved, and some of the structure really calls for that. This is meant to be 2 45-minute class periods. The spaceship voyage, they'll review this task where it gives them a scenario about this voyage that they're going on, and then it gives them a 4-stage rocket process for trying to make this decision. But on day 1, you put students into a group and you let them try to figure it out for 5 minutes, and you say to them, you'll have more sessions to figure it out, so you don't have to come to consensus after 5 minutes, but this is your first 5-minute session out of 6 that you'll have to start this discussion. And what you can imagine will happen in 5 minutes is a few students without structure are going to talk for a minute or 2 minutes, and then they've eaten up all the time. Not everybody got to talk. And so then you'll debrief what that experience was like for them. Did everybody get to share what happened? Why was it frustrating? How might you how might you structure time so that everybody does have a voice, and so on. Then in day 2, you really do give them a ton of structure in order to have discussions about who should go on this space mission. And this actually might be easier using Zoom than it would be in the classroom, or at least Zoom will make it easy to put them in and out of the breakout rooms. But each round, there's a different rule about how they're allowed to interact with each other. So in the first round, you will put them into the same breakout rooms they had for the first day. And then when they go into their breakout room, there'll be a timekeeper who is only letting people talk for 15 seconds. And then they're saying time, that person has to stop, and then the next person can start. And so it starts to show that they need to be very concise when they're talking and making an argument about why this person should be included or why they should not. Then in the second round, they get to use 15 seconds of talking, but then the timer also has to include 3 seconds of just wait time before the next person gets to start. So people have to process a little bit what they've heard before they come up with their next response or make their next case. And there's a link in the breakout room guide for an online timer in case they don't have a cell phone, but they could also use a cell phone or an actual stopwatch if they have one. But all of those directions will be in the breakout room checklist. And then through a series of these activities, then they will eventually come to consensus about the 7 that they want to send on this space mission, and then they'll report back to the class who they decided. And you can see if they all decided on the same people or not. Today we did an activity on cross-cutting concepts, and 3 of our 4 groups had the exact same matching answers, even though they were in different groups, which was fascinating. And so that is the gist of that activity. The only thing you need for this really are the 2 breakout room checklists. It is back and forth. So after each of those 5-minute breakouts, then you come back together as a whole class and talk about how did that go? How was that different from the time before? And there's discussion questions in your teacher slide deck that will lead you exactly through those discussions in between. So you'll have them in a breakout for 5 minutes, and they'll be trying to use the structure that's set up for that particular round. Then they come back and you debrief how did that go, and then you send them back out, and then back and forth. So that is the structure for task 4. And again, once you set up those breakout rooms and the timer is set for 5 minutes, it's pretty straightforward to put them, they're already in the same room, so you just send them out again and bring them back. It's pretty straightforward. Then finally, task 5 is practicing group work skills to construct scientific explanations. This gets into claim evidence and reasoning, which again, with the new science standards is where you should be heading in terms of helping students make sense of the world. So it starts to lay down the foundation for students, again, making sense of the world themselves and making claims based on evidence, and then the scientific reasoning behind why that might be happening. So there's some pretty great slides from Stanford on claim evidence and reasoning that'll be in your slide deck. And the behavior norm here is everybody helps, but it also reviews back to some of these activities that have been building up. They're basically using the same kinds of structures and behaviors in order to get this task done. This should take about 2 45-minute class periods. The first one will be this kind of introduction to what is a scientific explanation, what is claim evidence and reasoning. And you'll do a very simple water demonstration. So this just requires a couple of cups and a couple of bowls of water. And it's super easy. So the whole point of this demonstration, and if you wanted to switch it out with something else, you could, but I would encourage you to make sure that it is something that's really super simple. So basically the question is like, I'm gonna have a glass of water here. What will happen when I turn the cup upside down over a bowl? And of course, we know what the point is. We're not really investigating it. We want them to know what's gonna happen and have a good idea of why it's happening. But we're gonna do that 10 times because again, we also wanna show like, well, it did it once, but like, will it do it every single time? And wouldn't you know it, it certainly does. And then they make a claim based on the evidence and reasoning associated with that very simple demonstration, just as an example to get them feeling comfortable with claim evidence and reasoning. And then they'll get to practice constructing scientific explanations in this task. And those files that you need will be in the breakout room in the task 5 folder. So there'll be a breakout room checklist, and then this is for part 2, and then there'll be the document that where they'll actually be manipulating the claim evidence and reasoning statements. And at this point, we should have a look at what that document looks like. So this is set up, if we go back to the original folder, this is task 5, so everything I need should be right in here. A couple of these are documents that won't be in here later. We needed them for something else, but they'll just be these 2 documents, the breakout checklist, and then this evidence, task 5, claim evidence and reasoning. And on the breakout checklist, when you come into this document, this is what it looks like, and you're like, oh no. But in the checklist, it'll tell them how to scale it up. So you have to go to view and then zoom and then 100%. And then basically what you'll see is there's questions here. Don't worry that these are the same. This will be fixed later. There's questions here. And then along the side are a bunch of statements that are all mixed up. And similar to what they did with broken squares, they will be able to talk to each other, but they will be assigned a particular question. So if my question is, do plants need the sun to grow? Then Sherry could not grab something over here and put it in as the claim or the evidence or the reasoning, because that's my question. So she could suggest something and we're able to talk at this point. So she could say, Janelle, I really think that plants cannot grow without sun has to go with yours. That must be your claim. And then the evidence and reasoning part is the one where students are going to likely struggle more trying to decide, is that the evidence or is that the reasoning? But it shouldn't take them all that long to work all of these out. So they'll again be in groups of 3 or 4. There's 4 questions here, 4 different questions with claim evidence and reasoning for each one of those. And so they'll have a discussion, they'll talk about it, and there'll be a reminder that they need to use, again, that this is concise. You don't want to go on a lengthy rant about why this belongs there. Like, can you be quick? So all those skills that they've been practicing in the other tasks up to this point will be put into play for this final assignment. And then once they're done with that, you can bring them back together and debrief how did it go. And for students that are like me, you'll also want to make sure that you show them the correct answers so they can in their hearts know that they either had it right or that they should have fixed something. And that'll all be in the slide deck so that students can have that. And it's not so much about whether or not they do have the right answers, but it is more about the process and just debriefing. Did those norms, those group work behavior norms, help you work better as group members? And that, my friends, is the end of the walkthrough.